Okay, I think we're good.
All right, so if we are ready here, I would like to call the meeting to order and welcome everybody to the June 9th Complete Streets Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Complete Streets Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. So I would like to officially introduce the Complete Streets Commission members and staff. Very unusually in this section, I will actually have a question for staff, which is usually just a roll call. So the people here are Brian Altman, Katie Baruzzi, Jackie Sebrian, J.K. Jensen, Elizabeth King, Lydia Lee, Cole Sally, and John Cromie is absent, and staff present include Kevin Chen and Patrick Palmer. Patrick, will you please provide instructions about how the meeting will proceed? And Kevin, can you let us know, like, where in this introductory section can we actually introduce ourselves?
I can start it off. Thank you, Chair Levin and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the June 9th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. At this time, we will ask that the members of the commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Complete Streets Commission. And also for members of the public who are calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can just press *9 to raise your virtual hand. That includes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I can jump in here. So looks like we don't have anyone raise their hands. So Chair, if you would like to go ahead and make the introduction, I think this would be a good time for us to maybe get to know some of the new members.
All right, that sounds great. So I would love to just hear from everybody, including people old and new, and maybe for new people, say something that really brought you to the Complete Streets Commission. Why were you interested? Some piece of transportation that you may have enjoyed in Menlo Park this month, and one little relevant piece of your background, if it's relevant, as to like why you're interested in this. And I guess I can role model this. So my name is Adina Levin, and I think I got into the Complete Streets Commission. I started out being interested in environmental sustainability and was thinking about transportation as something that was really important for that. And I am interested in going out and bicycling and checking on, there's supposed to be a new bicycle pedestrian bridge by Facebook going over 84, and I want to bicycle over and look at it. So that is my brief introduction. Let's see, who wants to go next? We can
go next. Oh, okay. No, Jackie, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I volunteered to go next because I just rode past that bicycle bridge. That seems like it's almost. I'm excited for it. So I'm Jackie Sebrian, and I've been on the Complete Streets Commission for, it's hard to count time anymore because this year, does it count? So I don't know, a couple of years. I came to it from the transportation master plan thing, and I ride an e-bike from right next door to Facebook to Oak Knoll 189 days a year. So I'm testing out our bike routes across the city and back during our nice peak commute hours. And that's really what brought me here.
All right, that sounds good. By the way, we should also share our neighborhood. So I live near downtown, and Jackie, you're in
I live in the
Belhaven.
Belhaven neighborhood. Yep. I've been here for 13 years.
Cool. Let's see, who else wants to introduce themselves? Lydia?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Lydia Lee. This will be my 7th year on a commission. I started out on the Bicycle Commission, and then it merged with the Transportation Commission to become Complete Streets. Back in the day, I used to bike and take the train to my job in the city for some time. And then when my kids showed up, I started biking with them everywhere, first in a bike trailer, and when they couldn't even get on a bike, and, just all the way through. And now I'm happy to say they're both independent bicyclists that bike everywhere and wonder why they need a driver's license. So that's yay. Let's see, I live in I think it's closest to Park Forest in Menlo Park. It's this weird little peninsula of Menlo Park that's next to Atherton. So if you're on El Camino, you know where Celia's restaurant is. That's my street there. It's called Spruce Avenue. I also run the Facebook page Bike Menlo Park, and I am the Safe Routes to School coordinator for Hillview Middle School. And basically I do all my errands by bike now. Our family has one car, and so we are a bike-centric household. Yeah. Okay, that's me.
Hi, I'm Liz King. I am new to the commission. I'm kind of new to Menlo Park, actually. I moved here about 6 years ago from Nashville, and my husband's from the area, so that brought us back. And I joined the commission because I really am interested in being more involved in the community. And I am very much a pedestrian, and I like to walk in my neighborhood. I live in West Menlo Park, close to Santa Cruz. My children have walked to school. I used to live in Atherton on Alejandra near El Camino, and there was a tragedy there with a older woman crossing the street there. And given as much walking as I do, I really just wanted to get involved and see what we could do to make our streets safer for everybody. So glad to be here.
Great, welcome. Let's see, who else wants to introduce themselves? I see a Zoom hand from Sally. Sally, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, my name is Sally, last name Cole, and I've lived in Menlo Park about 8.5 years. And some of the things Lisbeth just said resonated with me, so I thought I would build on them a bit. I've been in Menlo Park for 8.5 years, and I've worked in the public sector at times in my career. In fact, I used to work for the New York City subway system way back in the day, so that was my beginning of interest in transportation. But I think one of the really cool things about transportation is that it's kind of like an invisible benefit. It's almost a given to people, but for it to really work well, it requires a focus and dedication. And so I feel that being in this commission, I could really focus on that issue. One of the reasons that I started thinking a bit more about it, really two. One is that I live on Santa Cruz Avenue near downtown, and I see all manners of craziness go by. And also, like Lisbeth, there was a sophomore in my son's school who was killed in a car accident on Valpo Hill in January. He was the driver, and I spent some time looking into it and talking to people, and I actually spoke at a public comment in the city council after that, just about some concerns I had with the safety of that hill to begin with. And it's not like I'm a single issue person, but it just gave me a feeling that those types of issues don't really see traction unless concerned citizens focus on them and really think about them and push forward for change, because I think the city council is so busy with a lot of other issues. So that's me.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome. Let's see, who else wants to introduce themselves? Brian?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brian Altman. I live over in the Allied Arts area on College for 28 years. And of course, enjoyed biking, walking, and occasionally driving through Menlo Park. Interested in getting involved. This is my first experience. So I'm interested in, helping out.
Great. Welcome. And who has not yet? Okay, I see JK fan. JK.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, JK Jensen. I've been in the city for just over 2 years. I'm from Arizona originally. I love biking. My wife and I both have e-bikes and we ride them around the city. I go up and down Willow often and out to Bayfront Park. We love just walking around the city as well and being outside. We have a brand new 2-month-old baby and I just love this city so much and I want to keep it safe for her and especially for her as she gets to the point where she can be in a trailer and then she can be on the back of the bike and then she can learn to ride a bike herself. We just care about this community and I wanted to get involved and it seemed like a really great way to actually make a difference in it. I'm really excited to be here and be a part of the committee or the commission, excuse me.
All right. Oh, excellent. And welcome. And Katie.
Hi, I was talking a lot before, so I feel bad, jumping in, but I'm Katie Baruzzi. I've been on the commission since 2016. I also, like Lydia, came from the Bike Commission. And I also came into this through cycling. I actually was a bike racer in grad school, and but I really got to learn how to bike for transportation living in Boston, actually Cambridge technically, where we did not have a car and did not live close enough to the subway station to make that a reasonable commuting choice. And so it's like combat biking in Boston. They don't have bike lanes, they have potholes. And the drivers actually want to kill you even if they see you. So it was, I came here and thought, oh, this is great. It's flat, it's open, there's some bike lanes. And it wasn't really until I started riding with my son to school and became a parent and started to see the infrastructure through the eyes of a child and then sort of watching other people's children that I started to think, this is fine for somebody who's confident and fast, but I bet we can do better for other people. And so I got involved in the cycling world, but actually the cool thing about Complete Streets is that we do everything. And so, over the last couple of years, I've also been spending a lot more time paying attention to our sidewalks and our crosswalks and just sort of the ways in which we make our biggest, most busy, fast streets safer or less safe for everybody, including drivers. So I figure everybody comes in here with a hook. And then I think we all get our minds expanded. So anyway, welcome everybody. Nice to see you all here.
All right. So that is really great to hear from everybody. And meetings tend to follow in a very structured way where we have reports and announcements, and then we usually have some kind of substantive agenda item, and then we go into subcommittee reports. The subcommittees are where we do a fair amount of our work. And so one of the things that we'll be hearing later on in the meeting is about the subcommittees, and we can be thinking about what things that you might like to get engaged with. But we will, today, because there are so many new people, our substantive topic is really going to be an orientation about the mission of and goals of the commission. But before we get to there, we're going to move on to agenda item number C, which is the reports and announcements, which is a standard item where under this item, staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items, although if somebody has a clarifying question of staff, they can ask a clarifying question. So Kevin, what reports and announcements do we have today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the spirit of not being very on the book today, I noticed that Commissioner Cole had her hand up. So I don't know if the chair would entertain maybe hearing that feedback first before I jump in.
Commissioner Cole, do you have your hand up deliberately?
Uh-huh.
Excellent. Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually wanted Kevin to introduce himself the way we did
Oh.
because I served on the Heritage Tree Commission a couple years ago, and the staff introduced themselves. I thought it was really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I
What
was
about
actually gonna do that. So great minds think alike. So yes, Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer with the city. I've been with the city for a little bit less than 6 years or so. So I came from a private consulting side where I worked for a private firm for about 9 years or so, and then had an opportunity to come on board to succeed in Menlo Park due to past connections, and so I've been with the city for about, like I say, a little bit less than 6 years. Most of my projects involve safe route to school I really work on a little bit of everything. We have development projects, so I review development as related to transportation. I also work on traffic calming projects. We currently have a really big Belhaven traffic calming project that's going on, so I'm the project manager for that project. We also work on very small projects, bike lanes, and sidewalk. We do have a CIP capital improvement program, which handles the actual civil design of sidewalks, but we do in the transportation division help out with all aspects of related aspects of that project. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to also open the floor to Patrick so he can introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, my name's Patrick Palmer. I'm an engineering technician with the Transportation Division, along with Kevin. I've been with the city for almost 3 years now, and I was recently brought on to the commission meetings to help out since they went virtual with some of the Zoom functionality. So that's kind of been my role in the last year-ish that all this is going on. So thank you.
Great. Great. Thanks. And every commission has a city council liaison, and the current city council liaison to the Complete Streets Commission is Councilmember Taylor. So I do not see her in the audience at this time today, but like when you see her, she's our city council liaison.
Great. With that, I will go ahead and jump into reports and announcements. So just to debrief the new commissioners, typically this is the time for me to make reports on actions or deliberations, or even just public hearings that the city council have conducted through their council meetings since the last commission meeting. So typically this is the time for me to report and make those announcements. So with that said, the one big item I wanted to make announce today is that the city council held a budget discussion meeting last night. So for some of you, I know you have attended. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight a few things that are more transportation oriented. First and foremost, just wanted to highlight a couple funded city council priorities that we'll be embarking on this year. Sometime this fiscal year. One is the Caltrans Rail Corridor Quiet Zone analysis. So this is with regard to the Caltrans crossings, and there's a strong desire from the neighborhood to look into establishing some quiet zones. So that's something that the Transportation Division obviously will be embarking on. The other thing is really just to memorialize the Middle Avenue Complete Street project. As some of you know, it's part of the recently adopted climate action plan. So again, this is something that's been on the plate for a while now, and really we just wanted to make sure that it's been funded properly, and of course it has been funded. Also, the Transportation Division, the Public Works Division specifically for the Transportation Division also requested an increase of 1 full-time employee, and that request has been tentatively acknowledged. I think basically with the addition of this new employee, obviously there will be additional workload that will be associated with that as well. And there's more to come as we kind of finalize our staffing resources. And also just to kind of before I conclude the announcement, that the budget is set to be adopted on June 22nd. So that would be a Tuesday. City council meetings are typically held on Tuesdays. So June 22nd is the meeting that the city council will adopt the budget. So for those that are interested, definitely want to stay tuned. And of course, once we have the agenda published, I will email the commission accordingly as well. So with that, I will go ahead and conclude my reports and announcements. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about Katie? Commissioner Bursey.
Sure. So I was curious. So I was watching the discussion, and I know there's been some talk within the public works budget about funding a staff increase for the NTMP, and whether investing more on the NTMP side of things might possibly delay projects on the CIP. And I basically just wanted to raise this as a sort of a topic that I thought we might be able to discuss at a future commission meeting, because I think it's been a while since we've got a bunch of new commissioners. It's been a while since we talked about that topic, and it might be useful even to have like a sort of overview of transportation related public works projects and sort of how they are allocated. So, we have this process for like the CIP for big projects, and then we have this other thing for neighborhood projects. I don't know, just an idea, not a question, more just throwing that out there. I think that might be a useful topic. Wondering if anybody else thinks so too.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds good to me, and it sounded like there might have been some council interest in that. Yeah.
There was at least one council member who said something along the lines of perhaps the Complete Streets Commission could revisit this process and consider whether there are ways for it to be streamlined or something along those lines. I don't know, it was late. But I just wanted to mention that and see if that was something we should maybe formally agendize, working with staff to find the right time. Looking at Kevin.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So
okay.
I would recommend that maybe we can put a pin on that for now, as later on, once I make the presentation about sort of the commission roles and responsibilities, I can make a couple highlights specifically regarding the NTMP process, is our neighborhood traffic management program. And then at that point, perhaps we can ask the chair or perhaps the entire commission if there's a few interested individuals that would like to agendize the item, because it is a topic that frequently get discussed. So for the new commissioners, you might not be aware of the process as regularly as the other commissioners. So I'll take the opportunity to familiarize you guys with that process, and hopefully by then you have an idea whether or not that's something that you're interested in taking on, because there are a couple steps that's required in order for the commission to take these on. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later on too.
Okay, that sounds good. And with regard to the budget, the Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee, we'll talk about that in our subcommittee report. As relates to what we have been charged with and how that is playing out with the city council budget. Okay, any other questions? Please, I can't see everybody at the same time, so please raise your Zoom hand if you have any questions. Okay, I do not see any questions on that. Let's see, going back to the agenda, do we have any public comment, which is now, there's just a part of the meeting where the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject that is not listed on the agenda. So speakers may address the commission once under public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes. And please clearly state your name, address, or political jurisdiction in which you live if you wish to give a public comment. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agendized items brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. So Patrick, do we have any public comment on items that are not on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to remind any people that might have just joined us, if you do have a public comment, just engage the raised hand feature. Then I'll be able to unmute you. And if you're also calling in by phone, it is *9 to raise your virtual hand. I give it a few seconds, but it does not look like we have a public comment at this time.
Although we have been joined by our City Council liaison, so virtually hello to Councilmember Taylor. Let's see, so we can move ahead and on to regular business, where the Commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require Commission approval. And the first item is to approve the Complete Streets Commission regular meeting minutes of May 12th, 2021. And does anybody have any feedback on the minutes?
Now might be a good time to mention the process of, if you weren't at the meeting, you don't vote on the minutes. And that would be a majority of us, actually.
That is correct, Commissioner Baruzzi. So for the last meeting, we have 5 commissioners, although 2 term out. So really, I'm just seeking a vote from Commissioner Cibrian, Lee, and Chair Levin, because you 3 were the only attendees. So if I can get a first and a second from someone, and then a vote would be great. Oh, Commissioner Lee, you had a hand up.
I have one comment on the meeting minutes.
Okay.
So I don't want to beat the proverbial horse to death, but on the, let's see, E4, where we were talking about Ravenswood, I just tripped over innovative bicycle marking for the westbound direction. And I was like, I had to stop and be like, what does that even mean? And then I think what we were talking about was basically sharrows for the westbound direction. And I think if what we are really saying is sharrows, we should just say sharrows in there, because if I were coming to this, looking at this agenda for the first time, and I was saw innovative bicycle markings, I would be like, what does that mean, right? So I was just thinking for the function of clarity, Kevin, if what we mean is sharrows, can we just say sharrows there? Would that amendment be okay?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a reasonable amendment, although I do want to say that in this case, we're not necessarily just saying sharrows, because there are some, and maybe innovative might be too strong of a word, but there are some other type of striping out there that highlights the sharing nature between the bike and the road. So in this case, this was really a recommendation from the Commission to essentially not limit the staff to just putting down sharrows. However, I will say it does require, a bit of research, and also making sure that because as some of you know, there are quite a few experimental striping out there that a lot of bigger agencies tend to be very liberal about the application of. So we need to make sure that we do our due diligence when it comes to making sure everything is proper.
Was this the thing that we saw in Oakland, the Telegraph Ave continuous sharrow thing? Was that one thing that was brought up?
Yes, that is exactly it. For those commissioners that might not be too aware of the striping in Oakland, there's a new kind of way of highlighting that sharing nature. Is essentially if you're driving down a road, let's say a 11-foot length road, you'll see right down the middle there's about a 4-foot wide green stripe that is just continuously down the road. That's kind of a fairly new development in the striping world to highlight the sharing nature. So that's precisely the one that we're looking into, but it does require some due diligence before we can safely proceed with actually doing it. So with that being said, I would say, Commissioner Lee, you're correct that at the end of the day, if there's nothing that we can put in, it ultimately becomes a sharrow. So I will leave it up to you whether or not you want me to just go ahead and change it to Cheryl, or if you want to keep it as the innovative striping.
I do not want to by any means restrict you guys from doing innovative striping strategies. Maybe, does it say, maybe just innovative striping or something? I mean, because just innovative bike markings just seem,
Well, could
I
it
don't know,
say
maybe I'm
something?
overthinking it. I could be.
Well, wait, what if it said something like, including Sharrows, bike markings, including Sharrows and other treatments or something?
That sounds like that would both address what Lydia said, which would make it basically easier for people to understand and be accurate in terms of what staff is doing. So with that edit, does anybody have is there a motion and a second on the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes with that change. Do I need to say the change?
Sharrows and other approaches, or Sharrows and
Yeah.
other treatments.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's very, very clear. So yes.
So someone second the approval?
I'll second.
There you go.
All right. Can any more comment or discussion on the minutes? And if not, can staff help us with the roll call vote?
Great, thank you. So Commissioner Cibrian, Lee, and Chair Levin, if you can raise your hand if you're going to vote yes. Okay, I'm seeing 3 hands. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Terrific. So yay, we have just done an official thing. Now we can move on to item E2, receiving a presentation on commission charges and responsibilities. And we will hear from Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer, to introduce this item.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. If you can just allow me a few, well, maybe a minute or so to just kind of set up and get my presentation. I have no idea how many screens I have on how many windows open on my screen. Here we go. Share my screen. Okay, if I can just have someone acknowledge that you can see my cover page, which says Complete Streets Commission Charges and Responsibilities. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome, great, thank you very much. All right, okay, great, awesome. So thank you everyone. Again, Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer with the City of Menlo Park. So happy to be the liaison for the Complete Streets Commission. And tonight, really, as the chair had mentioned, we are just basically trying to get a basic understanding of the Complete Streets Commission, given that we have 4 new members. So we're going to dedicate this time to really talk about some of the high-level functions, responsibility, etc., that I felt like would be beneficial for the commissioners to be aware of. Certainly, this is not the end all be all. So after the end presentation, if there's any clarifying questions, happy to field them. If there's anything that trigger you want to have an offline conversation, by all means, please reach out to staff and we'll be happy to set that up as well. So with that, just briefly go over the agenda. So I'm going to talk about really the commission's role, also the charges and responsibilities, and in this case, in the form of an annual work plan. And I'll explain what that is a little bit later on too. Also want to take some time to highlight some of the projects that we typically would bring to the commission for your review, deliberation, and recommendation. Also, I thought this would be a good opportunity to maybe highlight a couple of things. One is the conflict of interest. It is something that we want to essentially be aware of. There are a couple areas that I wanted to highlight. Also, just meeting procedures, although you guys have been kind of exposed to quite a bit, and the chair has done an excellent job of explaining it along the way. So I'll keep that short as well. So really, the Complete Streets Commission, I just looked it up. Our first meeting occurred in May of 2017. So as many of you have mentioned, the Complete Street Commission is a merger of a formerly bicycle commission and the Transportation Commission. And really this is the highlights the city's desire to really look towards complete street and hence the Complete Streets Commission. The commission has essentially two primary roles. One, as any other commissions, it is an advisory body. So what that means is that typically when a project comes to the commission will listen to public comments, public testimonies on the various projects. Either they support it or they have some reservations. Of course, then what it leads to is really a recommendation from the commission to the city council. So for instance, if we have a project, say a bike lane project that has 2 or 3 alternatives, we would then come to the commission with those alternatives, pros and cons, listen to comments, and then ultimately a recommendation will be coming from the commission that we would then bring to the city council for the final approval. Of course, out of all the advisory roles, there's also actually a decision-making role coming from the commission as well. And that has to do with parking. And I'll highlight that a little bit more when we talk about the projects that typically gets deliberated by the commission. But really, I just wanted to highlight that it is the responsibility of this commission to approve parking requests. And there's a caveat to that. It's up to 3 spaces in downtown. So, and in our definition of downtown, it's really defined by the downtown specific plan. So it's not just Santa Cruz Avenue, but it does expand a little bit more beyond that. Outside of downtown, it's then up to 5 spaces. Of course, then what that means is that any request that comes in requiring more than those numbers would then come to the Complete Streets Commission first for a recommendation, and then would go to the city council for final approval. Also, I just wanted to kind of highlight that quote. This is a quote that you can see from our Complete Streets Commission website. Really, it just highlights the role of the commission. I'm not going to spend the time to read it, so we can move on. Here is a slide that highlights the commission's charges and responsibilities. And like I mentioned, that typically comes in the form of an annual work plan. So for those that are not too familiar with what a work plan is, all the commissions, including the city council for that matter, they would, on a yearly basis, they would develop what is called a work plan. What it essentially comes down to is what the city council, or in this case, the commission, would like to work on, would like to see for this upcoming year. And again, it's an annual work plan. Due to COVID-19, our last annual work plan was actually approved very recently. March 23rd was the approval date for the last one. Although typically it actually is actually a good time for us to talk about the work plan. And I'll use maybe the next slide or so to highlight a couple of things as well. But really, this is just a very high level description of what's on the work plan. And for those that are interested, the work plan is on the Complete Streets Commission official webpage as well. But here, it just highlights the key categories that we're working on. It ranges from climate action plan to the transportation master plan, which is, maybe I should spend a little bit of time talking about the transportation master plan. It's a document that was recently approved by the city council. Essentially what it is a citywide document. It highlights, I always like to say, if money is no issue and we have unlimited resources, here is a list of all the transportation projects that we would like to do and like to see the project like to see the city work on. So it's really a long range plan that highlights all the transportation improvements that the city wants to build. Now, of course, once you dive into the plan, you'll see that it's actually separated by tiers, etc. And of course, there's some nuances to it as well. But overall, that's how I would categorize that document. Now back to the work plan, we also would like to support the city council on downtown access initiatives. Of course, Safe Route to School program, as Commissioner Lee had mentioned a little bit earlier, is one of the more prominent programs in the city. So really, as you can see from this slide, many of the objectives on here are tend to be fairly high level. And the reason why is because one of the things that we need to work on as a complete streets or as a commission is to need to make sure that our work plan aligns with the city council's work plan. Ultimately, the city council is the governing body for the city, and they dictate, not dictate, but they direct the city staff on the projects that they would like to see moving forward, and of course, how to spend the city resources. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that our commission work plan agrees with the city council's work plan as well. So that leads to the next slide here. Just a quick slide on the work plan process. So really, to no one's surprise, we need to develop a work plan. We need to get the commission to approve it. And we also need to bring it to the city council for adoption, with all of that being done essentially prior to September. And of course, after it's adopted, there's a quarterly report that we typically would provide. And usually that means, we'll come to the commission with some ideas about what to report, and ultimately we'll designate someone, typically the chair or the co-chair, or it could be anyone else for that matter, to go to the city council and do a quarterly report on what has been completed on the work plan. Now, I do want to highlight, as I mentioned earlier, because of the fact that we typically want to make sure our work plan is consistent with the city council's work plan, typically we wait until the city council to finalize their priorities and work plan, which typically takes place January, February-ish of each year, which means we typically will come to the commission with some ideas about what we want to work on our work plan by April-ish, and then we'll use the next couple of months to fine-tune that work plan and then ultimately bring it to the city council for approval. So that's just a quick highlight of the process of the work plan itself. And then here is, I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide as well. So here is a slide of some of the project types really that we would typically bring to the commission. Of course, being a complete streets commission, that means a lot of the transportation related projects from cars, pet and bike would sometimes come to the commission depending on the scope, obviously. So here are, so for instance, the citywide projects, as I mentioned, the transportation master plan, that was a huge undertaking by the city, as I described earlier. To no one's surprise, a lot of meetings have taken place for the development of the plan, including coming to the Complete Street Commissions several times as well. Later on, I think maybe in a month or so, you'll actually see the Transportation Management Association feasibility study. This is another project that have also been, we have came to the Complete Street Commission, I believe a couple of months ago for feedback, and would be going to the City Council for some deliberation as well. So those are, when it comes to citywide projects that has a heavy transportation component, we would typically bring that to the commission before we go to the city council. Now, as to your transportation projects, here are essentially a list of, I would consider them individual projects. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, if we have a bike lane, sometimes people just imagine bike lane as in, okay, a couple lines down the road and ta-da, you have your bike lane. And sometimes it is that easy, sometimes it's not. And we would have to, when there are times where we need some guidance from the commission on what's the best option to move forward with to the city council, then we'll come to the Complete Street Commission for that as well. There are also some streetscape projects and complete streets projects. There's one that will be coming to the commission, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Middle Avenue one. So this is a project that recently was blessed by the city council for the transportation team to work on. So we're still looking for resources to make sure that we handle it properly and correctly, but that would be one of the projects that will be coming to the commission at the appropriate time. And like I mentioned earlier, the commission does have the power to approve parking related requests. So in this case, redesignation, for instance, from a standard on-street parking space, maybe to a a pickup zone for pedestrian or for residents, or maybe even a yellow zone. Of course, sometimes we get requests to remove parkings outright for sometimes for the installation of bike lanes, because there's just not enough space to install bike lanes, so we need to take out parking spaces. Also, a lot of times you will see requests coming from residents asking to remove a parking or so next to their driveway for site visibility reasons, and those would come to the commission as well. Also, there's the grant applications that just simply, as some of you might know, the city usually we have our revenues, obviously, but as far as transportation projects are concerned, we also rely fairly heavily on grants that we can get regionally, or even from the state, or even from the federal level. So sometimes when a grant opportunity comes up, when staff prepares the application, we would like to present that to the commission, just so that the commission is aware of the type of grant that we're going after, the type of projects that you could be expecting to be seeing in the foreseeable future. Typically that involves, it could involve strictly design. For instance, we have grants that help with the design of the Middle Avenue pedestrian and bicycle undercrossing. That's the project that's going under the Caltrain tracks. Or it could be both design and construction, as one that we have recently been awarded for sidewalks on Pierce Road, a little bit on Coleman, and then also a couple of bike routes for the city. So those are grant opportunities that the staff is constantly keeping an eye on and making sure that we go after them at the correct opportunity. Then comes the neighborhood traffic management program. So I do want to spend a little bit of time kind of going over this. So this is a program that was established a while ago, I believe 2004, if I remember correctly. I might not have the right year. But it is a program that highlights how the city should handle traffic calming requests. And in this case, traffic calming request could really just be for instance, a resident could come to the city and say, okay, we are observing a lot of speeding, or perhaps a lot of cut through for the neighborhood. Are there things that the city can do to kind of help us alleviate those situations? And typically that would then become a form of a request through this program, neighborhood traffic management program. And that's why it's called traffic management. It really has to do with how we alleviate some of the traffic congestions that any residents within the city of Menlo Park would like to see resolved. As some of the commissioners might have mentioned a little bit earlier, this is a fairly intensive program. It requires a lot of collaboration between the residents and city staff, and the reason being it's a multi-step process. Later on, I actually have I prepare a reserve slide that kind of have the steps highlighted. If anyone's interested, I'd be more than happy to go to that slide and talk about it. But for the time being, I will say it is a fairly intensive process. Besides getting surveys from the residents, and it's typically within the area predetermined by staff, because as many of you know, if you put in a speed hump or speed bump to deter speeding or cut through traffic, sometimes that means you are pushing those traffics to a different street, to an adjacent street, right? So in this case, the project study area might not necessarily just be the street that is being requested, but also some of the adjacent streets. And that's a kind of a process that staff would be working with the resident to make sure that we both come to a mutually agreeable understanding what the study area is. Once that's done, there will be a survey to the resident that really, as I mentioned earlier, requires a lot of work from the resident side as well, but we require a survey to make sure that there's a general consensus from the neighborhood to want to move this forward. And of course, if it's assuming that we are moving forward, there'll be a lot of studies. This data collection will have to come to the Complete Street Commission, also go to the City Council. There's a trial installation period and a permanent installation period, because we don't typically go straight to permanent. We like to do a trial to see how it goes. before we make it permanent. So as you can see from just my description, you can see that it's a really long process because of the many steps that we need to go through. So this is indeed one of the more strenuous process, I think, in terms of just the overall time and also collaboration between residents and city staff. I think there's a more synergy, but also more synergy going on because we do work on this equally as well. So, okay, so I think for the next couple of slides, I'll just make them real quick. The first is I wanted to kind of just highlight the conflict of interest. Hopefully you have all seen the video that our city clerk sent out. I think maybe a few weeks ago. If you have not, I highly recommend it. Before this meeting, I actually sat down and listened to the meeting again. And even though I've heard that meeting, I've heard that same session, well, at least 5 times already. I feel like every time there's still a good reminder. So in this case, I do want to highlight conflict of interest, specifically for the real property and source of income. And this is fairly important for this particular commission as well, because as you know, you guys have a residence in the city. That's you guys are Menlo Park residents. However, when it comes to projects that are within a 500 feet radius of your residency, we would consider you to be conflicted. So in this case, any projects that are within that boundary would typically ask the commissioner to recuse himself or herself from deliberation. There's some other nuances to it. For instance, I would just highlight that if you are a renter and you have a month-to-month lease, so you don't have a yearly lease, you are renting month-to-month, then this doesn't apply to you. But any other situation, this does apply. For real property, there's also another category that is if a project is between 500 to 1,000 feet, there are some other conflicts that we potentially want to explore. And that has really to do with sort of how that project impacts the development value of your property or how it changes traffic around your area. And the reason why I want to highlight this is because as the Complete Streets Commission, sometimes you will have projects that changes the way that your neighborhood or your specific residents would benefit or maybe just change from that project. So when that's the case, we typically want to consult the city attorney just to make sure that that there's no reason for you to recuse yourself. Of course, if so, then we definitely want to make sure we do this properly as well. But generally speaking, a lot of times that 500 feet rule is the one that I do my best to kind of highlight. And of course, as commissioners, you guys know exactly where we live. So I wouldn't mind a helping hand from you to say, hey, Kevin, I think this project is within 500 air feet of my residence. Should I be recused? And then at that point, we're looking to that. The second one is source of income. And this, again, highly recommend you listen to the city clerk's video. But in this case, I just wanted to highlight 2. One is your employer, obviously. Menlo Park, we don't have a lot of large employers, but we do have Facebook. We do have Robinhood. We do have a couple of big tech companies. Of course, Stanford being one of them as well. So if you're an employer of a project that is being developed by that company, then we want to make sure that you're not conflicted out. Like I say, all of this, unless it's the 500 feet from your property, everything else, I would say let's chat about this with the city attorney before making that decision. There's also a source of income conflict for stocks, I believe, and this is outright owning a company stock. Again, I just wanted to highlight that because I know that some of, in case you have a stock of a company, again, Facebook being probably the biggest name that you'll hear, we want to make sure that we've done this legally as well. And finally, just a quick tip here, your spouses are subject to this, specifically the financial interest as well. So if your spouse for instance, a Stanford, it works for Stanford, then we want to make sure that we highlight and check those as well. Okay, so I believe this is my last slide. So talk about meeting procedures. Again, I think fairly covered extensively by the chair already. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. We do have a public comment period for non-agendized items. So when you hear something like that, what we typically is we just listen to it, and then if there's a need to address it, we do minimal discussion because we're not supposed to discuss anything that's not on the agenda item, and then we'll take care of it offline. When it comes to regular business items, this is kind of the standard procedure that will follow. You have a presentation by staff or consultant, followed by some clarifying Q&A. We do our best to highlight all the information in the staff report, and of course the presentation as well, but obviously we can't cover everything. So typically after the presentation, we'll open it up for clarifying Q&A from the commission. Followed by the public comments period. This is basically the time for any people that are interested in the project to voice their opinions. Typically they get 3 minutes to speak, fairly standard process if you listen to previous city council meetings in the past as well. And then finally, kind of the deliberation or recommendation from the commission. And sometimes, we still get questions as well during the deliberation period. By all means, that it doesn't mean you can't ask any more questions after the clarifying Q&A session. So with that, I will thank you for listening to my long presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you might have on this. Chair, if you're speaking, I think you're muted.
Okay, yeah, so I saw a hand from Commissioner Cole, and here's who's raising her hand. So Commissioner Cole.
Thank you. I had a question, sorry for my ignorance, about the transportation master plan. Is that something that the city council passed at some point and now we're working toward its goals, or is it something that's maybe passed and renewed and evaluated every year?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the transportation master plan has been adopted by the city council. I believe it was adopted earlier, toward the end of last year. I believe December, November timeframe. Like any other documents, the transportation master plan is a living document. Our goal, at least from a staff level, is that we don't have to update it every year. We would like to maybe update it every 5 years or so, which is kind of a typical timeline for many major citywide documents. Of course, that doesn't always have to be the case. If there's a major change in sort of the structure of the document, or perhaps the way, if you go through the document, there's a section that talks about how to prioritize projects. So if there's a major change in that, obviously we want to update the document as well. But it has been adopted. We do not expect to need to update it every year. At least that's the goal. But
okay.
Yeah.
Is it important for new members to have a look at it, or maybe have like a short tutoring session? Maybe someone could go over the high points, or is that an important thing for us to be aware of the context of that and the sort of biggest priorities?
Yeah, that's actually that's a great question. I would say it certainly would be beneficial for commissioners to just familiarize yourself with the document. As part of the process, we actually created a web page. I'd be happy to send that web page to the whole commission for some of you, just be a refresher course, obviously. There is a map on that web page that I would highly recommend to kind of scroll through, and it's fairly interactive. You can zoom in, zoom out. It's categorized by tier, but also by type. So you have a pedestrian, bicycles, or vehicle, transit. I would actually, that's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and share that with the team, the commission here, and then you guys feel free to kind of scroll through it. It was first created as a introduction for the residents. So all the information on there, while might not be the most current, but it's fairly good. So I would recommend doing that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Thanks for the good questions about things that are important. I have a thought about an orientation session that we'll do, I think maybe when we do subcommittees that may have an opportunity to get more into that. So Commissioner Jensen has a hand.
Thanks. Yeah, not explicitly related to this particular presentation or the things that you mentioned. Thanks so much, Kevin, for covering them. But related to processes and procedures, in the training that you were talking about, the video training, it mentioned that City Clerk Heron mentioned that as part of the procedures of the commission, we have another commissioner who's assigned as a Brown Act kind of partner. Is that something that will be taken care of in one of our monthly meetings, or is that outside of this meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it's something that typically kind of naturally happens, to be honest. Staff, it's not something that we do like manually assign, although I'd be more than happy to do so as well. But typically what or at least just based on my own experience, as the commissioners kind of grow from attending more and more meetings and kind of familiarize yourself and ultimately joining some of the subcommittees that are of interest to you, then there's naturally kind of that bond and that kind of buddy system that gets formed. So typically that's kind of how it evolves itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool, thanks. Commissioner Baruzzi.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about that, which was that we haven't done Brown Act buddies officially, although I'll do like nose counts, like mentally if I'm talking to people. One thing though that's kind of interesting with the subcommittees, because I agree, the subcommittees tend to be a lot of places where things that are coming on the agenda get discussed, is it sort of, the subcommittees shuffle from year to year sometimes. And I actually wanted to ask a question of Kevin. Let's say hypothetically that we had a committee, like a few years ago, we had I was on a subcommittee with Bill and John, and we were talking about the citywide, plan with all the possible bike lanes. And then a year and a half later, I'm on a different subcommittee with a different set of commissioners, and we're talking about a downtown access, and there's overlap. Because there might be a bike lane that my first subcommittee was discussing hypothetically that might then be discussed with a different subcommittee. And I am curious about if there's a statute of limitations, if two different commissioners knew what I was thinking about, 18 months or 2 years ago on a topic, but it wasn't ever agendized during that time. And then with a different subcommittee, I'm talking about, the same street, maybe in a different context. You might not know the answer to this, but I think this is, this came up for me when I was looking through emails on Sharon Road. And I was like, I wonder, anyway, so I just wanted to flag that for you and see if you had any thoughts or could take that to Judy Heron.
Yeah, no, that's, I think you brought up a really valid and quite frankly, probably a very possible scenario for quite a few folks here. I will say typically for the subcommittees, they have a very defined objective that they're trying to achieve. So in this case, I would say, even though you might have known based on a previous conversation about something that's related to what you're working on now, that it kind of belonged to that time, for that moment in time. So I certainly don't think that necessarily prevents you from maybe joining another subcommittee. And as you know, the same commissioner sometimes is on 2 or 3 subcommittees, and so we kind of know the lay of the land from a few folks. I would say at this moment in time, certainly as a commissioner, I ask for your due diligence to make sure that if you felt like you are close to, violating the Brown Act. And in this case, basically what that means is you share with more than, in this case, 4 commissioners, what everyone's views on a particular, subject is, right? Because we have 9-member bodies, so five people would constitute as a quorum. So in this case, we want to make sure that we don't share more than 4, basically. But I would probably more so, maybe I would try to treat that as like a case-by-case scenario. If you felt like, any of the commissioners might felt like I might be treading on a bit of a violation, potentially a violation here, then let's talk about that and maybe bring in the city attorney or the city clerk to make sure that we are on the right path.
I have one follow-up on that, and this is going to sound incredibly pedantic and belabored to people who haven't been in the thick of it for a long time. But I mean, our work is kind of funny because we do have this transportation master plan that was approved, and the transportation master plan subcommittee went through every single one of the 180 plus projects in excruciating detail, and biked all over the city. Like we were really, and so we were focused on getting on the plan before it was approved by council. But having been through all of those projects with Commissioner Levin as part of the TMP subcommittee, I have had conversations with Commissioner Levin about every conceivable street in the entire city. And at some point, any one of those might come before the commission. And it doesn't seem reasonable to me that I would be if I'm on a different subcommittee because we're working on, there's a particular thing, that a different subcommittee is working on that came from the transportation master plan, which is like the approved city document that our commission collectively voted to support. It would seem like the fact that we collectively publicly voted to support it would sort of cover us from a Brown Act perspective, but I just want to be sure. And if nobody else followed what I'm trying to say, that's totally understandable.
Yeah,
we see different streets at different points over a multi-year period.
Yeah, so I think that we would need to check with the city attorney on any specifics. So I want to up level this a couple of steps and then see what you were saying, and then see if anybody else has any other comments and questions. So the up level is that for folks who haven't been on California public bodies before, the Brown Act is a state law that requires public meetings for deliberations of the body, and in particular for deliberations of a quorum or more's worth of people in the body. So that means that if you're discussing something that is going to come before the body in the future, that you cannot talk together amongst a quorum's worth of people. So it needs to be, in our case of our body, you can only talk to up to 4 people. And it's also not okay if you talk to 3 people and then the 4th person talks to a 5th person. That's called a serial meeting, and that is also not okay. So you need to make sure that in that conversation about something coming before the body in the future, that you're talking to less than a quorum's worth of people. And so having a Brown Act body to that first topic means that there is one or a sub-quorum's worth of people that you are talking with about this topic that is coming before the body in the future, which I think is the thing that addresses, Katie, your question, because it seems to me that it pertains to things that you are discussing in the present about things relating to a decision in the future. So if there was some conversation 5 years from now that wasn't related to a particular decision in the future, then it wouldn't be a Brown Act violation. But for anything in particular, we should check with the city attorney if there's some actual issue at hand.
This is starting to resemble one of the T.S. Eliot 4 quartets or something. It's it's getting mind-bogglingly telescoping, but yes, I think I understand what you're saying.
So does anybody else have any other questions or comments about the lay of the land here? I see Commissioner Lee has a hand.
Yeah, I would just say that with regards to the transportation master plan, that even if you don't go and look at every single individual project, just the introduction, which I think is the first 30, 40 pages maybe or so, is really useful, and it talks a lot about the strategy, the overall like ideas of what the city is trying to accomplish, and the like approaches to getting those streets safer. So, and it just has a lot of, it goes through some of the jargon so that you'll feel really comfortable when people start talking about like different types of bike lanes and sidewalks and traffic calming measures. So yeah, I would highly recommend that.
Good advice. And so there was one more hand. So Commissioner Altman had a hand and then put it down. So if you have a question, please do not be shy. And I still don't see a hand, so we'll go to Commissioner Cole.
Okay, I just have one more question. Thanks for the responses on my question around the transportation master plan. Does the commission have the power to call its own public hearing? To say, we would like to hear what the public has to say about a crosswalk on Lemon, or, safety on Middle for bikers, and just call a public hearing?
So typically when it comes to agendizing a meeting, it's done between the chair, co-chair, and staff member. And I think in this case, staff, we have a lot of projects that we're currently working on, and for a given period of time, we kind of set up a few projects for the next few months that we're expecting to come to the commission on. So in this case, I think a lot of times a particular project coming to the commission is simply dictated by what project we're working on and the timeline of that project. So that covers some of the set meetings and items. Pertaining to, I think, what you're asking for, which is kind of, can we have a meeting perhaps just on a project, or maybe on a location that is not necessarily something that staff is working on? Sorry, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
No, I wasn't saying something random. I was saying
gotcha.
in the process of working on, a subcommittee or working with the staff on something that was a priority on the commission, did we have the power to say, well, actually, it might be good to get a read on public opinion on this and hold a public hearing?
Absolutely. And sorry, Chair, I was going to just use this as a good time to talk about the NTMP program, for example. I'm just going to use that as maybe an example. So for instance, it is a policy that was previously approved by the City Council. So when it comes to a document that was previously approved by the City Council, in order to make changes, we'll need to go to the City Council. But prior to doing so, we'll want to know if the commission has a desire to even take it on, for instance, and hopefully I didn't scare you away from the process as I was describing it a little bit earlier. But if there's a desire from the commission here to want to maybe explore making changes to that policy, then we'll want to bring that up right now, and then subsequently staff will be then working with the chair to agendize it and see how everything kind of fits along the way. So absolutely, when it comes to the subcommittees, as you guys are working on, a particular project that is part of the work plan, and you want to bring that particular topic, subject, or maybe even just a thought to the commission to have a further, more in-depth conversation, those are certainly things that we can agendize with the chair and co-chair. Of course, it also dictates based on availability as well, because like I say, we do sometimes have projects that we want to make sure that we get the deliberation from the commission before we move forward. So sometimes we do have like projects that want to make sure that it comes to the commission at the right time. But other than that, we are definitely welcome to agendize anything. Not anything, but anything.
And thank you. That was just a really quick follow on. Who is the chair and co-chair? I'm so sorry, I don't know these things. I just really want to make sure I understand.
That's
Chair,
okay.
So
Commissioner
Levin?
Chair right now is our chair, Dina Levin, and then our co-chair is Lydia Lee.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I wanted to speak to that very good question and address two different aspects of it. One is a formal aspect, and the other one is a content aspect. So in terms of form, the meetings that the commission has are monthly, and those change extraordinarily rarely. Like, we can expect that in a given year, those meetings are going to be monthly on the second Wednesday, and that may never change. You know, if there might be some extraordinarily exceptional circumstance that would change that. In terms of if you're on a subcommittee, that subcommittee can choose when it meets, and it doesn't need any kind of notice. It just agrees to meet amongst itself. So that's in terms of the scheduled meeting. The scheduled meetings are monthly on the second Wednesday. The subcommittee meeting can be whenever it is that you want to. And then in terms of agendizing a topic for a public meeting, that's what Kevin was talking to in terms of having the agenda being set with staff and the chair and the vice chair. The thing about the topics that get agendized is that there's some things that come before us because of what, you know, something is coming through the city process and staff brings it to us. And Kevin mentioned those in the material that he just presented. And other things that we are working on tend to be following the work plan. So in general, we're supposed to be working on things that the city council has delegated to us in our work plan and not something else entirely. If we have a great idea about something that we want to work on, we can, and in the past have, discussed amongst ourselves and then recommended to the city council that for the city council to ask us to put it on the work plan, and then we can work in general on that topic. And then if there's something that falls generally in the work plan, you know, those are the things that we can work on, you know, something that might get agendized in a given meeting. So does that help contextualize your question?
Yep, it does.
Okay. Cool. So I see that Commissioner Baruzzi has a hand again.
I wanted to bring up 2 points relevant to that. And one is actually, there's sort of a weird third category of things that we've done in the past. Well, actually, let me go backwards for a sec. One of the reasons we're being a lot more explicit about the work plan now is that I think especially when folks first come on the commission or in the first couple of years, like a lot of us come on with sort of hyper local ideas. You know, there's this thing in my neighborhood that, you know, now I'm on a commission and I'm going to go for it. And then you sort of get exposed to the city timeline and like all of the things that have been in the pipeline for 5 years, and how something that you might think takes 6 months actually does take 5 years. And so, like, you know, you might inadvertently have a really cool idea for a project and sell it all the way up to council, and then accidentally bump something that was in the pipeline that somebody else had a cool idea for 4 years ago. And then, you know, you're sort of, you know, with the best of intentions, slightly disrupting the process for the city. And so the safest way to avoid accidentally hurting someone else's advocacy is to try to work closely with staff and stick to the council work plan as much as possible. But there are times when, you know, I can think of one really clear example when, you know, everybody's moving so fast and it becomes clear to us that it would be important for the commission to weigh in on a project. And maybe staff didn't see it that way. And so, for example, there was a time when Draeger's, there was a development behind Draeger's that was discussing eliminating parking next to Draeger's and putting a loading zone on Menlo Avenue right near that stop sign. And, you know, it was a development project. One might not have thought that that would be something that needed to come to Complete Streets, but our chair at the time saw that and thought that could really mess up circulation to have big trucks on Menlo Avenue next to Draeger's coming at all times of day. And that might be bad for cyclists biking to school. Maybe the Complete Streets Commission should have a hearing on that before, maybe it shouldn't just go through planning and council. And so, you know, Bianca Walser, who was the chair at the time, did end up getting that on the agenda and having the commission weigh in on that. And I think it ended up changing the project for the better, because we do have a lens that not everybody has when they're reviewing things, like the circulation lens. So I think that another thing to do, and Kevin's really great about this, actually, he sends us council agendas and topics that council's talking about that we might want to pay attention to. It's good to see what planning is doing too, because, you know, circulation is such an important part of development, and thinking about circulation as connected with development is, you know, it ends up being useful for us to weigh in sometimes. So there is that caveat that, like, I don't know, Kevin, if that's officially, we're not allowed to do that anymore, but that there's that sometimes that, you know, maybe once a year or something, we'll see something where we'll be like, hey, seems like Complete Streets should have a voice in this too. Kevin's usually been really helpful and gotten, I mean, it's extra work for staff, but it usually works out okay as long as we don't abuse it.
Yeah, so the commenting on transportation elements of development, I think, is still somewhere in the description of things we can work on. So I think that is kosher, and staff can tell us if I incorrectly remember that it's still in there. So I see that Commissioner Cole has a hand. Again, is that a legacy hand or a new hand?
No, sorry,
Okay.
that was like.
All right, excellent. And this has been quite a lot of information. So, you know, don't feel bad if, you know, if you're just like, wow, that's a lot of information. But if you do have a question, feel free to ask now, or feel free to ask later, because there's going to be many more opportunities to ask more questions going forward. Any final questions and comments on this general topic before we move on?
Did you need to take public comment on this?
Thank you,
Right.
Commissioner Peruzzi. I think because it's a regular business item, we should probably open it up for public comment, just to procedurally make sure that we are following it properly. So,
all right. Is there any public comment about the commission charges and responsibilities? I'm not seeing any hands. We'll wait a second. Any hands on the commission responsibilities? Seeing none. All right. Moving on. So we're going to move on from this. So speaking of chair and vice chair, this is something that the commission reviews and decides on an annual basis. And so now is that time. So under E3, we will discuss the chair and vice chair for the coming year, and Kevin Chen will introduce this item.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So as the chair mentioned, this is the time of the year where we select a chair and new chair, a new chair and co-chair. It could be existing chair and co-chair, doesn't have to be new. But really, I just wanted to kind of maybe share a little bit about the responsibilities of each of the individuals. Obviously, as we know, we have 4 new commissioners. As I mentioned before, one of the main responsibilities of the chair and co-chair is meeting with staff offline. So this again will be once a month to set up the agenda for the upcoming month. Typically, we would do it once we have a chair and co-chair out, then reach out and then make sure we set up a time that is best for everybody, obviously. But I do want to highlight that that is the responsibility of the chair and co-chair to work with staff and agendize the each monthly meetings. Besides that, I think the chair and co-chair sometimes they do also get feedback from residents as well. I would say most of the time, an email would then go out to the entire commission, but sometimes the chair and co-chair, they do also get email just giving the title on the web page. So sometimes they do get emails from residents that's just assigned to them. Of course, by no means am I saying that that's something that the chair and the co-chair would need to address themselves. Typically what happens is that they'll share it with staff, and then staff would then work with the chair and co-chair to make sure that whatever comment got sent their way gets addressed properly as well. But so that's typically the responsibilities. I don't know if Chair Levin Co-Chair Lee, if you guys have anything else that I missed. I know Commissioner Peruzzi used to be a chair as well, so I think I highlighted most of the responsibilities, but feel free to correct me or add to it. Commissioner.
Yeah,
Lee,
I mean, that sounded good. I think speaking to what Commissioner Cole said, a way to get something on the agenda is either to mention it in a commission meeting, for example, in a committee discussion, or to send a note to the chair, vice chair, staff, and as a way of requesting that the item get agendized. Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and Kevin, excuse me if you said this and I just totally missed it, but the chair also presents to the council regularly, right? Like once a quarter, is it? Sorry, did you say this already and I just spaced out?
I did mention it earlier, but
okay,
I think no, that's worth mentioning again.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be, but typically we designate the chair to represent the commission and provide those quarterly reports to the council at the appropriate time.
And I would also say that that meeting with staff, and specifically Kevin, is a delight because you kind of get to talk about like what's going on behind the scenes and whether it's like a right time to bring this particular thing up or really bad time. And so, it's just a little bit more like insider, not to say there's anything fishy going on. It's all above board, but it's just a little bit more like, given your staffing, do you think this is a good time? It's like that kind of thing, logistics. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say I do appreciate those conversations as well, because I think I forgot if it's Commissioner Peruzzi that mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think we all have a set expectation of how of how long a project should take, and I'll be first to recognize that in my days of a private consultant, I had the same feeling, right? Because we move our projects really fast, and sometimes the public opinions might not be something that is in the forefront of our mind, but being a public agency and making sure that we're serving the residents and Menlo Park business owners equally, and make sure their voices are heard. Sometimes that does dictate the length of a project, because we wanted to make sure that the outreach is done properly and making sure that everyone is heard. And of course, in this day of age, there's many different platforms that we can go with, and sometimes that also make it a little bit more difficult as well. It's just the lay of the land when it comes to making sure that we hear everyone's feedback for any particular projects. So with that being said, is there a strong? I know that we have 4 new commissioners. So with that in mind, if there's any other feedbacks, we can certainly open the floor to accept nominations for chair and co-chair. I would say let's go with chair first, or if there's any other feedback from any other commissioners, happy to hear them right now. Otherwise, I can open the floor for a nomination for a chair.
Well, who has, so Commissioner Levin, would you like to continue serving in this role? How does it work? Is that typically helpful to the efficacy of the group if there's some legacy or permanence to it?
So this is a strange year, because something that often happens is that the vice chair spends a year kind of like learning the role, and then commonly doesn't always, but often steps in and becomes chair. But it doesn't always happen. It's a common thing though. And then there's a kind of rotation where people learn what's going on and then take on those roles. This year is weird because both Lydia and myself have 1 more year to go, and then we term out. And then there's a lot of new people. So that is a situation that we have this year.
So you both have 1 more year and then you're leaving the commission. And this so the nomination is for a year term of being the chair and the co-chair. Okay.
I would say, I mean, I want to check in with Commissioner Sebrian, who's been on the commission for longer than an hour as well. But, you know, I would say that if Commissioner Sebrian or Lee or Levin wanted to take the chair role this year, I would be happy to nominate any of them for the continuity, but that I would then encourage us to consider, I mean, it's a lot to take on a new role on your first meeting, but I want to emphasize that if there's somebody on the commission who's even new tonight, who feels like they have the capacity for those extra meetings, I found that to be a really great learning experience. And I think sometimes it's hard to feel like you really know what's going on if most of the work you do is on camera on the dais. So it can be really a great way to, it's an orientation to the city. So I guess what I'm saying here is I'd love to nominate somebody who's been on the commission for a while to be chair tonight. But I'm hoping that people who have not been on the commission as long would consider stepping up for vice chair.
I'll talk next. So I actually don't want either the chair or the vice chair right now. And part of it is I just have too much on my plate to do that job well. Although I was chair of the library commission for a while, so I can definitely speak to the benefits of being chair, and that I didn't find as library commission, like it's not like a ton of extra work, at least it wasn't in that, but I am just sure I can't take one more and you fit one more extra thing on this year. But so yeah, and that a year as vice chair, like even for new members, I think especially if you are familiar with the commission process already and you feel pretty comfortable, like you're going to have a whole year of sitting in meetings and talking about street things, and you'll be, by the time the year is up, you'll be ready. That's, you know, me just giving you jobs.
I'm just going to throw this out there and see if it sticks. I would nominate Adina Levin to continue as chair this year. Given, you know, her experience, I think that anybody can learn a ton. She knows more than anybody on this commission about all kinds of transportation issues, and it would be, I just think with so much going on, like she'll do a great job, and anybody who serves with her will learn a lot and get a great, it'll be a great experience. So I nominated Adina.
I would second that.
Great. Awesome, great. So we have a nomination for current chair Levin. So maybe just are any other nominations? Anyone else interested in becoming a chair? Don't let that scare you away. Okay, so I guess in this case we have a chair Levin. I just want to make sure, are you comfortable with that nomination, chair, or want to make sure that you can do it as well?
Yeah, so I have one more year to go, so I would be fine with serving in that role for another year and doing more mentoring of other people, so there can be more people playing these roles in future years.
Okay, great. In that case, I guess that just for formality, if we can have a raise of hands, if you would like to vote Chair Levin, if you can just kind of raise your hands, I can see everyone's screen, so that would be great. That's unanimous. Awesome. Thank you very much here. So next would be our vice chair, co-chair. So in this case, again, fairly similar. I think at this point everyone knows that the vice chair also attend those agendas meetings. Again, you are obviously welcome to provide your feedback, etc. During those meetings. And also, I would second the idea that, you know, I think Chair Levin would be a great person to learn this particular job from, given her vast knowledge, not just in the Menlo Park, but I think Bay Area overall. So at this point, I will accept any nomination for vice chairs.
You all don't know each other yet, but you should feel free to self-nominate if you're up for it, and don't feel shy, and nobody would judge that. That would be totally fine and reasonable and welcome.
thank you for clarifying that. Actually, yes, definitely welcome anyone that wants to self-nominate.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky here for any one of us to nominate anyone since we don't know each other very well. So, but I just want to say that you know, being co-chair has been really like, it's kind of fun in a way, like, because we have our official meetings and then you get to have these like behind closed curtains meeting with staff. No, no, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's a more intimate kind of relationship than you have just serving on the regular commission. So even if you don't decide to take on this right now, which is totally 100% understandable, it is a big ask for the first meeting, I think. I recommend it highly to think about for future, you know, for the future, and that year will go by before you know it too. So if you're not ready to do it yet, just keep thinking about it.
Well, Commissioner Lee, I know that earlier people said it was probably sensible for the co-chair to be a new person to be carrying on, you know, after you and Commissioner Levin go, but is that your opinion as well? Or do you have a strong desire to stay in the role?
You know, I could go either way. I feel like if somebody is interested and has the bandwidth to do something like this right now, you know, and it just means that it might be doing some extra reading, or I don't know, having some, just making sure that you are, you know, reading all the staff reports carefully, maybe reading the past few just to get caught up more quickly. So it would involve some homework, and not everyone's, you know, if you haven't been, especially if you haven't been on a commission before, you might not feel totally comfortable with having that, but you're not really in the spotlight the same way the chair is. Like, the chair is the one that's running the meeting. So you kind of get to take a little bit of a backseat while still having feeling like you're in the know. Does that help?
Yeah. I also have a wacky idea that I want to put forward while people ponder whether they want to step forward this year, which is one idea that Katie and me and maybe Lydia had in a sub-quorum Brown Act compatible discussion to model being Brown Act compatible. Well, what if, given the fact that we have so many new commissioners, and it would be great to bring people on, but it's like kind of, you know, like a special person might feel ready to step up, but, you know, some people might not. Could we actually say, well, let's continue as is for 6 months, and then, you know, and then rotate. And then staff looked into it, and it's actually in our bylaws that we need to make the change annually. And so my wacky idea, which we may or may not want to pursue or have the ability to pursue, is what if we actually amended the bylaws and had the, you know, gave ourselves the ability to, you know, choose when we do the chair and vice chair, and have the ability to, you know, set a time 6 months in the future where we would rotate somebody in. Would that be possible? Could we change our bylaws to allow that if that was considered desirable by the body?
Well, I hate to say no in the first meeting with 4 new commissioners, but unfortunately the bylaw is something that the city council develop, and in order to change that bylaw, we would need to go through the city council. So at this moment in time, I would say no, in a sense that we won't be able to do it quickly enough, because there is a, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we do have a proper channel. If we want to make something changes, we do need to go through it. But in this case, the policies that have been developed for the commissions and committees, it really spans across the entire city. So for something like this, it impacts everyone. So we can't just go ahead and unilaterally change that. I apologize for doing this so early.
All right, it was a creative thought. Thank you for that answer. So I see that Commissioner Seabrian has a hand.
Is there any way that we could like just kick the decision to next month? Like to at least unless I am super happy to nominate Lydia to continue in the role that she's doing. I have no problem. I think that is a great choice, but
Yeah.
I also, I want to offer the opportunity for people who are new to the commission, if they are interested in stepping up and, I don't know, maybe in a month after having sat on it, they might feel differently. That being said, I'm also really happy to nominate Lydia for it too, and be done.
All right. So I see that Commissioner Lee has a hand.
Yeah, so I had another thought, which is a little out of the box, and it has nothing to do with changing bylaws. I was going to suggest that as a way to ease one or more members in, actually, because, I think when we nominate people, usually, there is a little bit of like, we would like to have everyone be more involved, right? Is the general idea, and to see how, to take as much leadership as they possibly feel comfortable doing. So one possibility is that if I stay in as co-chair, vice chair, whatever, then when Adina and I and Kevin have our meetings, I would be happy to fill in any of the commissioners that wanted afterwards to kind of go through what we discussed, to let them know that this is what we talked about as kind of like an informal briefing. And I don't think it would violate Brown Act things because it would just be one other commissioner, and I would not talk to anybody else about that. And if someone would approach me, or I would send out, I don't know, we'd figure out logistics of it, but basically anybody who wanted to find out what was discussed during the agenda setting meeting and what the behind the scenes stuff was, I could fill them in. And that way it would give you a taste for what it was like without having to actually be in the meeting. That could be a possibility. Or could we even, Kevin, could we even have somebody be part of that meeting other than just me and Adina? Would that be another?
That was the idea that I had, because it doesn't violate the Brown Act. It's 3 people.
Right.
Kevin, is that could we do that?
Commissioner Cole's hands up. I don't know.
Oh.
Commissioner Cole, do you want me to answer first, and then you?
You can answer first, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the easiest one would be I'm not sure about the third member being at the agenda setting meeting. I think that's certainly something that I can run by the city clerk just to make sure. But I think the idea of maybe we move it to the next meeting, so that way, any of the new commissioners that are interested in talking to staff, or like Commissioner Lee mentioned, if they want to talk to the vice chair just to get some idea, I think that's actually a really good idea. So of course, assuming at least one of the new commissioners are interested in the role, but still have some reservation about that the amount of time needed. I think that's a good idea. Happy to postpone it to next month, and then in the meantime, allowing those individuals to reach out to staff or Commissioner Lee and Chair Levin to maybe have a further dialogue of just the amount of effort, and maybe I scare somebody away with all the responsibilities I mentioned. Let me put it this way: at a minimum, or at most, you just need to spend 1 more hour of the month for the agenda setting meeting. That's it. That's really the yeah.
So if we go in that direction, then Kevin, can you in the meanwhile check with the clerk if that would be kosher to at some point in the year invite a third person to the agenda setting meeting who is interested in learning?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so for those, just for the new commissioners, typically we will have our agendas meeting. Like, so for instance, this past year, we have our agenda setting meeting at the last Monday of the month. So in this case, our next agenda meeting would be June 28th, that Monday at 2 o'clock. Of course, we can work with you to work on a schedule that is, doable for everybody. But I do need to check with the city clerk real quick just to make sure that is standard procedure.
Okay, so I see that Commissioner Cole has a hand, Commissioner Jensen has a hand, and we should start to converge this item because I also want to do subcommittee introductions in this meeting. So before we all get really tired and bored. So Commissioner Cole.
Yeah, not tired or bored yet. Yeah, I think the one thing about this discussion, which has been really interesting, and I appreciate the perspectives of the folks who've been on the commission for a while, but is just maybe asking the people who are new, the Commissioner Jensen, Commissioner King, Commissioner Altman, if they're interested. When I just want to offer, when I was on the Heritage Tree Commission a couple of years ago, I was the vice chair. Drew Combs was the chair. He's now on the city council. I thought it was an interesting experience. I definitely appreciated working with him. And I would be potentially interested in being the vice chair, but I really would also like to know a bit more about my new co-commissioners to see if they're interested, because maybe there's someone with a really compelling motivation to do it that we haven't heard from.
All right. Great. Commissioner Jensen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of in the opposite direction. I'm not really interested in taking on the position of co-chair at this point, just with the other life changes that I've been going through. Like, I'm so happy to be on the commission, but I'm not looking at being the co-chair this year. But definitely interested in learning more about it for the future. I don't know if that helps you and other new commissioners' decisions or thoughts on self-nomination, but I'm not going to plan on self-nominating at this point.
Okay. Great. Thank you, and enjoy the new expanded family for the year. Commissioner Altman.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Just learning what's going on. And, I appreciate the openness. I do have a comment generally about this agenda setting, backroom kind of stuff. And I know it's meant in good faith, but it's a little surprising to me to hear that that we as a group ourselves don't set the agenda, that there is some other meeting where people meet and get the real goings on about what's happening. And then that is a result of an agenda that dictates the focus of what we spend our time on. So, but I say that in all remedialness. I'm definitely remedial. So I'm just learning.
We might have oversold that point a little bit. If memory serves, what happens is I show up at a meeting and Kevin hands me an agenda and it's like, this is what the staff think you should be on your agenda for next month. And then we ask questions. And then we say, hey, about that pothole on this street that I noticed, while I have you as a captive audience, it's more like an opportunity, not so much to drive the agenda, because that really is driven heavily by staff and by our work plan. It's more an opportunity to get to know Kevin and get to know how the Public Works Department operates. And I hope I'm not, misspeaking here, but it's the chance to ask the questions you might feel dumb asking in a public setting. It's that. It's like so when I say back room, it's not like, it's not such a powerful role as it is just an opportunity to ask all the questions and be curious and yeah, that's more it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I would definitely say that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, with so many projects going on and in various timelines of their status, typically agenda setting is really dictated mostly by the schedule of those projects. So I would usually go to the chair and co-chair with the agenda, a draft agenda, talk about it a little bit about what it is at that time. Usually within a couple of days or so, there'll be a staff report associated with that, which is public record for everybody's viewing. And so I would say a majority of the agenda items is set that way. But of course, there will always be a time where in a public forum, there might be a commissioner or a subcommittee that wants to bring something to the commission at a future date, and at that point it will get brought up, and then there'll be a brief discussion as to whether or not the commission overall is interested in listening to the item, and if so, then there'll be an opportunity to put that on a future meeting agenda. I would say at that, and in the past, I have tried to do, what I try to do is, because we kind of know ahead of time which project at what stage is coming to the commission, I at the beginning of my tenure as a liaison, I would update the commission at least maybe a meeting or two ahead of time by saying, okay, at the next meeting, that is very likely that we're going to be looking at this project. And at some point, I think that kind of got dropped just because we have so many projects going on. The timeline just make it a little bit more difficult to predict. And also at that time, I think our meetings were running a little bit longer than usual. So we were looking for ways to just cut back on the meeting time. So that was one of the items that got eliminated. So happy to kind of bring that back. I will say that, with COVID, that certainly doesn't help with the whole agenda situation in terms of just looking ahead. A couple, typically we have a pretty good sense of what we are looking for within the next couple of months or so, because we internally have a calendar that we're tracking for projects. But anything beyond a 2-month calendar, I try not to bring that up as much because that tend to change a bit. So yeah, I would say we probably upsell the whole idea of being able to just put anything on the agenda a little bit.
Commissioner Lee.
I guess I apologize for using I think I used the term backroom as well, which makes it sound like things happen in secret and people don't get to have weigh in on things. I actually think the more important, even more important than the co-chair role in a lot of ways, where things actually, ideas are able to, percolate and get feedback from other commissioners, is in the subcommittees. And the subcommittees are a really useful way to work on specific things. I know, Adina, you're saying timeout. I'm segueing over, right? So what I'm proposing now is that we table the whole co-chair and chair stuff till next. We'll just vote. People have a month to think about it, ask questions. We do the vote next month and find out a little bit more about what's possible and not possible from Kevin. And instead we go straight into subcommittees. We do, quick summary of what they are. And then you guys can, this may speak to your personal, your motivations for joining the commission. You might see a subcommittee that you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to work on.
Fantastic. Is that acceptable to the group as a whole, that we put off the vice chair vote until next time and people ponder whether they want to self-nominate, and in the meantime also think about getting engaged via the subcommittees in the shortly forthcoming agenda item?
And so the purpose of putting off the vote is so people can think about whether they want to self-nominate and learn more now about the subcommittee role to see if they'd prefer to do that.
I mean, it's not, you don't have to choose between being on subcommittees and, being, self-nominating to be a vice chair. You can be a vice chair and also be on subcommittees. But for someone contemplating how they want to get more engaged, having that upcoming agenda item will help you think about that too.
I feel like we are so close. We've had Brian and JK take themselves out of the running. We've had Jackie take herself out of the running. I'm going to take myself out of the running unless
I'm going to take myself out of the running. I think I enjoy being on a subcommittee and really learning over the course of this year.
Let's just see if we can power through this and get to the subcommittees. I love the idea, Commissioner Lee, but I think we can. We're so close.
All right.
And it sounded like Commissioner Cole might be interested, and if she's not, I would nominate Commissioner Lee. But I'm curious.
I'm interested.
Okay.
Okay, great. So in that case, we'll go ahead and plug in Commissioner Cole, and in this case, I guess we'll say self-nomination. And then, okay, so if we can have a show of hands, those.
Wait, we need a second. I'll second that.
Okay, yeah. Do we need? Yes, second that. Thank you.
How am I the Robert's Rule person tonight? It's like-
No, I always appreciate somebody keeping an eye out for that too. Okay, so if we can have a raise of hand if you voting for Commissioner Ko to be the vice chair. Okay, great. I'm seeing unanimous. Great, awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
and
you,
so
everyone.
then, yeah, so then also we have a tradition of celebratory cupcakes. So until the commission resumes in the meeting room, we have a rain check cupcake also for Commissioner Lee for serving as vice chair for the last year. All right. So thanks all for this deliberation, which is a fine practice deliberation for when we need to make other decisions. Thanks again to Commissioner Lee for being vice chair this past year and much ongoing sage wisdom, and looking forward to working with you, Commissioner Cole, as a vice chair this coming year, and want to move on in the agenda. Let's see, where are we? Okay, so now we're moving to agenda item F, which is informational items which are transmitted to the commission in staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. These are not action items. However, a commission, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. And so the informational item here is the update on major project status from Kevin Chen. So Kevin, what major projects are there updates on?
There you go. Sorry, I was unmuted. This is one of those rare times, actually. We have a lot of projects going on, but not quite enough to have a project status update yet. So in lieu of that, I will let the commissioners know that the Bayfront Bridge that a couple of commissioners mentioned, we do have an expected completion date, which is November of this year. So fingers crossed that it meets the day, and by December time, commissioners can ride a bike down Choco and cross the bridge to get to the parks or the trail accordingly. So that's my update. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. So we're getting there's an undercrossing in Redwood City, and then the Adobe Creek Bridge in Palo Alto, for which the major piece of the construction of the span just got deferred again. So we could do at some point, maybe before the end of the year, a figure 8 ride on our new crossings of major highways. All right. Any questions on major project updates or public comment on major project updates? Not seeing any hands. Not seeing any hands on public comment. We can move on to committee and subcommittee reports, including a orientation idea that I would like to bring forward and get staff's thought on at the end of this. So usually in these meetings in the committee and subcommittee reports, we have reports from the subcommittees. And in this case, in addition to the regular report, would like to have somebody whose name is on the subcommittee to describe what the subcommittee is, and get a chance also to hear from new commissioners if they have any questions or express some tentative interest on being on that subcommittee. You don't have to make your final decision now. We can't vote now. It needs to be an agendized item that people are self-selecting for subcommittees. Kevin, are we allowed to, in this agenda item also, once we go through all the way through the list of subcommittees and somebody says, wow, I wish there was a subcommittee on X, can we do this here, or does that need to be separately agendized?
Right, I would say we need to separately agendize that. So at the end of this conversation, if we have any new commissioners that are interested in joining, we will certainly be agendizing that at the next meeting to formalize that. So I would say now would be a good time to have that discussion, but yes, we're gonna have to agendize it in order for that to materialize.
Obviously, we would need to agendize like formalizing anything. The question is, can somebody raise an idea about, I wish there was a subcommittee on X? Can somebody describe this under G today?
I would say certainly to just mentioning it would be probably okay, but we certainly would not be able to have an extensive discussion. I think a notification of an interest would be good, because then that helps us agendize it for the next meeting, knowing what exactly we need to discuss.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so G1 in the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee, the City of Menlo Park has an ambitious climate action plan to greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions by some amount, by some date that somebody else is probably going to remember. And this is a subcommittee where it used to have more people, and the other people on the subcommittee have are no longer on the commission. One thing that this Climate Action Plan Subcommittee does is it works with the Environmental Quality Commission and partners in work on the Climate Action Plan implementation. So in the one of the things that we have done in the Climate Action Plan subcommittee is discuss how we're going to be, so the City Council has said we would like the Complete Streets Commission to come up with a goal for reducing vehicle miles traveled, which is highly correlated to greenhouse gas emissions until such time as all the cars are electric. And so that's a project that we're going to be working on going forward. And I think that's a 2-year goal. Any other questions about the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee, or anyone who's potentially interested in the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee? And this can be things relating to active transportation and transit, things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it can also be electric vehicles, electric cars, electric scooters, other types of low GHG emission transportation. The sky's the limit as what people want to work on. And let's see, does anybody have a hand? Commissioner Jensen.
Yeah, I'll express interest for this. I'd love to get an item on the next agenda for myself to be part of this subcommittee. Sounds interesting to me. I've done a bit of research on electric vehicles during my graduate program, and it's a fascinating area. I ride an e-bike all around, so I'd love to be a part of it.
All right, cool. Any other questions or self-volunteering on interest in Climate Action Plan Subcommittee? All right, I am not seeing any. Okay, you can, if you have an inspiration, we can continue to take inspirations through this agenda item. And Commissioner Bruzzi, do you want to talk about downtown access and parking and what it is, and any invitation to others?
Sure. So again, this is a subcommittee of one, unfortunately now, but it wasn't before. And the idea behind this was that, periodically, although not necessarily during the pandemic, there have been concerns in our community about sort of making the downtown parking more efficient, more accessible. And Commissioner Levin and I thought we should probably just broaden that to like, considering how people get downtown generally, because if the goal is a vibrant downtown that attracts people and where people feel safe to walk around and there, there are bike racks and things like that, then that'll be good for our community. So we haven't done much with this committee recently, partly because of COVID. We did sort of, I think, have opinions about some of the downtown activity around COVID, some of the sort of street closures and things. But I would, I imagine that this will become a more important topic, in the next couple of years. And if anybody's interested in thinking about circulation through downtown, that's, innovative strategies to use our existing land better, more efficiently, anything really, that I would welcome anybody to join me on this. I see a couple of hands raised.
That's Brian. I'm definitely interested.
Okay, cool. JK, you too? Or no? Phantom hand.
So sorry, I left my hand up from previously.
Yes, that's dangerous. You're gonna end up on every subcommittee. Okay. Why should I take the multimodal metrics subcommittee too, since I'm still talking?
Yes, please.
For efficiency? Okay, so there are two subcommittees that sound really similar and they're really not. So the first is the multimodal metrics subcommittee. And this is basically the idea that historically, when our community has been evaluating giant development projects like say Station 1300 or whatever it's called now, there's been an environmental impact report and an analysis of how very specifically the development will affect traffic and the old way of looking at this under CEQA used to be level of service, which is basically how fast cars get through an intersection, how efficiently cars move through an intersection. The CEQA guidelines have actually been updated. And so now instead of looking at how fast cars get through an intersection, we've been advised to look more broadly at whether a project will develop or will generate more traffic, vehicle miles traveled. So, does building this big building, does it cause more people to drive? And if so, how can they mitigate that? But we've been talking too about, well, drivers are not the only potentially affected parties, and they're also people, and they're also not the only mitigations that could be available, right? So the idea here, we used to call it multimodal level of service or pedestrian. I don't remember what the original name was, but it's basically the idea of, can we start measuring the impact of changes to our city on all users, on cyclists, on pedestrians, on drivers, et cetera? And can we start thinking about how to codify, how to quantify even changes, both good and bad? Like, are there metrics that we can be developing about how to count all of these other people who are moving around our city who are not necessarily in a car? And can those metrics be useful to the city as we look at projects that are coming before us and potential mitigations that they may develop? Yeah, did I get that right, Kevin, Adina?
Yeah, but that is good for a high-level summary. So okay. Yeah, and
so Commissioner Levin and I have been on this incredibly wonky thing, and one of the things we were looking at with another commissioner who recently had to step off was, for example, looking at streetlight data, which is basically a way that the city has of they basically takes, as I understand it, mobile phone data, anonymized mobile phone data, to try to track how people move through communities. And the city has an account to access this data. And so one of the questions we had was, and the data is fine-tuned enough that it can distinguish who's walking versus biking versus driving, right? So one thing was, what can we learn from the data that's coming into our city about how people are moving, and can we work with some of the streetlight data to anticipate better the kinds of projects we should be doing and how we should be mitigating potential impacts. I'm being a little muddle-headed tonight, but that's the gist, if anybody's interested in this.
Yeah, so I see a couple hands here. So Commissioner Jensen.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a clarifying question here. I was gonna originally ask, yeah, if we have any infrastructure in place to measure this data and, or like measure and collect, and then does the commission have access to it? Sounds like, yes, we have the streetlight data. Are there other sources of data, or are we looking at projects to gather from other sources?
There are a couple of things. The city does counts at various points. There's also, though, Strava, which is a biking software. Strava has like a Strava Metro thing that shows, you know, a subset of the cycling community. That, Kevin, are there other things that you can think of?
Yeah, so I think you touched on the city count. So I was afraid to throw too much information to the new commissioners. I was trying to refrain from adding more to it. But you're right. Every 2 years the city would conduct a citywide count. So this counts would include, you know, intersection counts, typically the peak hours. Also, in addition, so for the intersection, you have cars, you have bike, and you have ped. And typically it's one day. We typically would do it in the fall season. In addition to intersection counts, we also do basically daily counts for a roadway. And then again, this will span across the entire city. Usually the major corridors, obviously, but typically when we know ahead of time, we have a project coming up at say a collector, something smaller that we typically wouldn't include, we would do so as well. But generally speaking, it's the major corridors. So those would be what we call average daily counts. And those are strictly just kind of cars. If there's a tube on the ground, you might have seen it lately because we just recently did one for the COVID. We try to get a snapshot of what the COVID traffic is like. So we got some counts out there. So those are the typical ones we do for every 2 years. We would aggregate them and then look for a trend. As a matter of fact, the one that we're doing next is actually this year in the fall. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Streetlight was also mentioned. So Commissioner Peruzzi is right. For those that know the term big data, it's basically a lot of data, cellular data that the companies collect anonymously, and they aggregate the data in a form that is useful for us. The one thing that we realize quickly is that while it is powerful, it also takes a lot of time to digest that information, even set it up and run it. Patrick's done a few of them, and so he knows firsthand how long it takes. So one of the things that when we were having that conversation with Commissioner Peruzzi and former Commissioner Patrice about this was that we might have to, if there's a desire to look into that, just the sheer amount of effort that it takes, we might have to think about how to best get that going. But we do have a license, we do have access to those data. It's not quite to date, meaning because they do aggregate it and kind of disseminate that information. It's about, I want to say, 3 or 5 months out. So we wouldn't have information from, say, February to now. The latest would be like February or maybe March, something like that.
There's one more data source that I've been using frequently that I'll mention. And if you want to geek out in your own time, you can. But there's something called SWTRS data, which is basically like the accident reports from the state of California. And there's a group at Berkeley that's generated sort of a GIS mapping tool that you can join for free. You have to log in with your email, but they don't, you know, it's a public benefit. And you can do things like, which I was doing just yesterday, say, you know, in Menlo Park between 2009 and 2019, you know, what accidents happened involving pedestrians between the ages of 5 and 14 on Monday through Friday during school commute hours. And then it'll show you hotspots. It'll rank the intersections and tell you which places are most frequently accidents happening. You can click through and get the accident reports, such as they are. So that's another way to sort of look at what's been happening historically, at least. And of course, that's just accidents that get reported, for which there are police reports generated. So that wouldn't be everything, especially everything involving kids. But that's another data source that we use.
All right. There's certainly a lot to talk about in this topic. Commissioner Altman.
Yeah, my question is this an attempt to model traffic behavior in a city? Is that what it's attempting to do? Or is it attempting to come up with new parameters, more current parameters by which models could be developed?
It's something quite high level. I think it was just, Kevin, you can help me out here because we talked about this a while ago. It was basically looking at what tools were out there and considering what additional metrics we might recommend to City Council that they consider taking into account.
Have other cities done similar studies? You know?
Right. Yeah. So I can take that. So first of all, I would say the latter. Commissioner Altman is kind of developing those parameters, not necessarily modeling the behavior per se, but more kind of looking at it from a single point of view, a snapshot. So it is a fairly, I don't want to say it's a fairly new concept. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, it's been done before. So again, in the interest of not overloading you guys with information, the reason why this was brought before the commission was because, like Commissioner Baruzzi mentioned, you know, we used to have a whole way of looking at environmental impact for developments, but with the new change in guidance, they went from level of service to vehicle miles travel. But with that in mind, City Council still has a desire to look at developments from the lens of operation. So our existing transportation impact analysis guideline has both VMT, vehicle miles travel, and level of service. It has both. So what that means is that when a development comes in, if it meets the criteria of a certain size, it needs to do analysis for both. And so that comes back to back in the olden days, when people talk about level of service, it's mostly just cars. And with people are more conscious and want to focus on pet and bike, this is an opportunity for us to update that guideline and perhaps tell the developers, hey, we don't, you know, look at VMT because it's a California rule. Look at level of service for cars because that's what the city wants to do. But let's also take this opportunity to maybe look at how we can improve pet and bike. So that's kind of the sort of the high level conversation. And going back to the nuances, that goes back to there are methodologies out there that really look at pet and bike from a level of service standpoint, meaning you can actually do a lot of analysis. But those are relatively very intensive, and the results from staff's perspective aren't that great in terms of evaluating, because something that is, say, a level of service A for a pedestrian might sound great, but in reality, it might just mean a lot of space, but not really connecting. So because of the nature of level of service is looking at an isolated location, and that's why this sort of subject came up was, hey, maybe if the commission has a desire to not just look at a single location, but looking at more from a corridor standpoint, this is now our opportunity to do so because we're looking to update our guideline accordingly. Yeah. Yeah. So in a way, you know, this is one of those where it's very broad, and I recognize that it could be too broad almost for someone to get a handle on. But I think Commissioner Baruzzi and Chair Levin have been able to kind of drill that down into something a little bit more finite.
Okay.
All right. And just to speak a little bit more to Commissioner Altman's question, and then to assess a little bit of interest and then move on. This is something where we as a commission are not inventing new things in the world. We're not doing science, and we're also not doing the measurement. But because this is an emerging area and we're thinking about what would be useful for the city, what we've been asked to do by staff supporting a goal of City Council is to look at the various different ways of assessing impact and benefit for modes other than cars and make some recommendations about what might be good for the city, where the final decision will be made by City Council with the professional recommendation of staff. So is anybody, and you don't need to decide now, but like you can raise your hand if you think you might be interested in this interesting yet wonky topic.
I'm interested.
Okay.
I was going to say, I have a list of links. There are a couple of research institutes that have done some interesting work on this, some thought on this, and I can share those with, here's how we typically share things if we want to share with the commission as a whole and don't want to like violate the Brown Act. You can email something to Kevin as sort of an FYI, and Kevin can send that to the whole commission. So I can share articles and research that way. But I'd be happy to share that with people who are interested. It's okay not to be interested too.
Okay, and by the way, is staff, I am taking scribble notes about who's interested in what, and is staff taking even better than scribble notes? And this is not
I
a
would say
commitment,
better, but I am taking notes, yes.
Help remind us. Okay, fantastic. So we will move on to G4, which is the multimodal subcommittee, which focuses on a grab bag of topics relating to regional multimodal transportation, as well as policies affecting regional multimodal transportation, like transportation demand management, which is policies that can be used at a city or sub-regional level to help reduce the amount of solo driving. For which I have a brief update, which I watched a part of one of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's, it's the Bay Area Toll Authority strategic plan meeting earlier today, and that body, through the MTC's various convoluted committees, is working on a program called Dumbarton Forward. They have a whole series of Bay Bridge Forward and other forwards, that's what they call it. And in their 2-year strategic plan, they're planning a whole bunch of improvements to help speed up buses on, over the Dumbarton corridor. And so that was interesting. I would be and would welcome if staff thought it was appropriate to get some update on that program and bring it to us about what was expected to happen over the next couple of years to improve transit over the Dumbarton corridor. There's also some non-trivial amount of funding that is available for that project over the next couple of years. Commissioner Sebian, do you have anything to add? I will also open for any questions or expressions of interest. And I also realized on this topic that I forgot to mention an edit on the minutes. So if I have chair's discretion before we adjourn, I'd like to go back and reopen the minutes and make a 1-word correction on the minutes. Great. We'll do that after G7, and staff, please remind me if I forget, because in the minutes it said Manzanita, which was one of the types of Transportation Management Association, but we really talked about a couple of things under Transportation Management Association. So I would like that corrected to talk about transportation demand management and TMAs. Anything from Commissioner Sebrian or any other questions or expressions of interest?
I don't have anything to add to that great description of that.
All right. Any other hands? I'll actually toss in another update in here, which is that Caltrain electrification, which is going to be really handy for Menlo Park, like other cities on the Caltrain corridor, because we're going to have more frequent train service. but that's not going to happen until 2024 because there was an announcement last week, Thursday, at the Caltrain board meeting that project is sadly delayed and about $300 million over budget. Anybody else interested in this topic? I am not seeing any, so we can move on, and nobody needs to make any decisions here. If you decide that you're interested later, you can join later or ask questions later. On the Safe Routes to School program subcommittee in G5, if members of this subcommittee can give an update, including anything that this subcommittee wants to do with respect to an issue that is before the City Council in its budget discussion, which is relevant to this G5.
Katie, do you want to talk about, I'm sorry, it's getting late.
Yeah, I can take this quickly.
Yeah, can you? Thanks.
Yeah, there are a couple of things, and in the interest of time, I don't want to go through everything, but I know that Commissioners Lee and Sebrian took part in a walk. Oh, I'll tell you what this is first. Safe Routes to School. It's exactly what it sounds like. We liaise with educators, with public safety personnel, with the city staff who are in charge of the city-wide Safe Routes program, and with other sort of community advocates around ensuring that the children in our community are able to get to school safely and effectively. And there's a whole program involving multiple E's that one can look into. And there's this is one of those things where there's not so much a one-time project that the commission works on, or committee works on, as a sort of ongoing connection. So there's a monthly stakeholder meeting that the city has been running with a lot of those people that I just mentioned. There's a lot of work with schools that's done. So there was, for example, a walk audit in Belhaven recently that Commissioners Sebrian and Lee were able to attend, where we're just looking at how children in that area are getting to school and trying to understand what some of the safety issues might be, and helping the city with their planning process. Another thing that Commissioner Lee and I were working on this week was a sort of unexpected request from the Menlo Park City School District to consider where we might be able to use additional crossing guards. And so, you know, that's a complicated issue. We didn't have very much time to think about it, but you know, it's those sorts of ideas that we tend to grapple with. How to educate children, how to structure the built environment so it's safer for them. You know, using a child height lens on a lot of things, and you know, how to be realistic about, like, you know, designing streets that are like a little bit idiot proof. Because I'm sure some of you have seen the way our teens move through town on bikes. It's great that they're not driving cars, but sometimes we have to sort of, you know, they're young and they're, you know, not always being as safe as they could be. So trying to figure out how to help them be safer, but also sort of mitigate any unintentional impacts of their not so safe behavior, etc. Did I say?
I'm interested in participating.
Great, awesome. I think there was an agenda item last night on the city council about reinstating funding. And one thing that Commissioner Lee and I talked about this today was that we're excited that the city has invested more in a centralized role to support the Safe Routes effort, so that it's not so ad hoc. And we really, you know, we have some interesting ideas that we'd love to talk with council and the Safe Routes coordinator about at some point. But you know, if council member Taylor is watching, I think we're keen on seeing that program continue, at least as we're keen on seeing the city to continue to invest in the program. Right?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we talked about, Menlo Park is an interesting situation because there are so many, there's multiple school districts, there's a lot of private schools. So, you know, I think the lens of, like, you know, we should come up with a city-wide program is really difficult because of all the individual institutions. So, I think there is a way to do a very targeted program for the resources that we are able to invest in it. You know, we have the role is part-time, the city role is part-time. And so given that part-time nature and that, you know, and it's what we have to work with, I think there are strategic ways to use those resources in a more, in a very, you know, just be very clear about these are the things that we want to see happen. And let's just be really specific about what we can do with that fund.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds really great. That sounds like the city council was asking for some guidance on this topic, and you have provided that as a subcommittee. So unless anybody else on here objects, we don't have this agendized as something to vote on. So I don't think that we can do that. But one thing that we could do that we've done before is when there's a subcommittee that works on something that's of interest to the council, but the commission hasn't had time to vote, that subcommittee does express their opinion to the city council in the context of the council's decision, saying that this was something that the subcommittee did that the commission hasn't voted on. That would seem cool to me for that to be conveyed to the city council from the subcommittee with that standard disclaimer. Is that the informal consensus of this body? Any objections to that?
No objection.
All right, great. Yay, subcommittees.
I'm sorry, Chair, just so that I was a little bit, so is there a desire from the subcommittee to express something to the city council as a whole, or just reach out to individual council members?
Katie, you were you were monitoring the meeting, right? What was your sense of what they were asking from us?
I believe that what I heard was that, last night they were not voting formally on the budget, and that council members weren't completely clear that they wanted to support the what did they call it? Reinstatement of the budget of the Safe Routes to School program in the budget without hearing from the Safe Routes to School subcommittee on the Complete Streets Commission, is what I remember hearing. Commissioner Levin, is that what you heard as well? So
yes.
And so I just wanted to flag that for the commission and say, okay, well, I don't know if we as a commission at this point can formally vote and say we all agree, because not everybody is up to speed on that. And I'm not sure that would,
and it's not, and we don't have time, and we don't have officially time to do it.
Yeah, so I think our subcommittee can reach out to council members and have conversations with them about how it's been going and our hopes for it, and maybe that's what we should do, and not try to vote on an official commission.
Yeah,
I think that makes the most sense to me. And by the way, that's something that commissioners should feel. I'm sorry, we're jumping around, but developing relationships with council members and having conversations with them is also something that a lot of us do, and could be useful. And it's really another great facet of getting to work with the city, is getting to know the different council members. And I'm always kind of impressed that they have the time to talk to me, because it's a really busy job, but that's another avenue for sort of connecting with the city and trying to understand what's going on and having an impact. And when we do that, we typically speak for ourselves and not for the commission.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. So basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's just that the subcommittee has a desire to reach out to council members about essentially continuing the program, the existing program that we have. I see. Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, so moving on to the Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee, where when we update this subcommittee, I think Commissioner Baruzzi has been may be interested in officially joining, but at any rate, this subcommittee has, so the charge of this subcommittee, we had talked earlier in this meeting about the Transportation Master Plan, which is this multi-year effort to have a master plan of many projects of different types to improve transportation across the city in multiple modes. And this body had a subcommittee that was working on and making recommendations for the Transportation Master Plan while it was being developed. And then made recommendations for it to be implemented. And then once it has been approved, we have a subcommittee that is focused on getting that good plan implemented. And there are a couple of priorities that we had voted to support as a commission in terms of the Transportation Master Plan implementation. And those include supporting projects in the Transportation Master Plan that do some combination of improving safety on high injury corridors, reducing injuries and deaths, and reducing vehicle miles traveled by providing safe and compelling competitive alternatives to driving. And so with that, part of that charter includes looking at the city's capital improvement plan and budget and making recommendations to the city council about projects that we believe do a good job of achieving those goals. So earlier this year, we had made a set of recommendations as to projects to achieve those goals, commenting on the capital improvement plan. And now that the city council is going through the process of deciding on the budget, last night at the city council meeting, I did represent the things that this commission had already decided and written a letter on. So I reiterated that. And one of the things that there are a couple of projects in the capital improvement plan that has those properties. One of them is there's an upcoming project to repave Middlefield Road. There's a Transportation Master Plan project for bike lanes on Middlefield, as well as in the capital improvement plan, there is one of the intersections on Middlefield that is slated for improvement to start getting worked on in the coming year. And then in the Transportation Master Plan, there are several other intersections along Middlefield. So we as a commission has recommended that the city council, that the city bundle several intersections all together. So we wind up with a safe corridor while that corridor is being worked on. Also in the capital improvement plan for the coming year is crossing improvements on El Camino Real, which is one of our major high injury corridors. And one of the things that was uncovered in a budget community meeting was that these projects are possibly at risk based on the staffing availability in transportation. So the ongoing recommendation of this commission is to recommend that there should be resources to implement such projects that implement the Transportation Master Plan to achieve those goals of safety and VMT reduction. So that is a report from the City Council, executing on things that we had already decided to do. Any comments and questions on that? And I've got another item under this header to also put forward for potential agendizing in an upcoming meeting. Any thoughts on the budget as it relates to Transportation Master Plan implementation? I am not seeing any. That either that was fascinating and complete, or boring, or it is late at night. The other the other item I wanted to put forward underneath this header for potential agendizing is one of the items in the transportation master plan is let's see, trying to think about kind of how to let's see. Maybe I should have brought this one up under multimodal. Actually, somebody help me. Let me introduce the topic. Somebody help me figure out which header it should go on. So in the discussion of transportation demand management, we had this very confusing staff report that suggested that we should either be helping city employees avoid driving by getting Caltrain passes, or we should use some other service that would help them take transit, across the bay. And that is really a very silly choice. But the reason why it is a choice is because our region's public transportation system is not very well connected, and it's not really planned to work as a system together, and it doesn't give an employer like the city the ability to support its employees to take public transit coming from any direction. So fortunately, there is a regional initiative that is happening with a set of seamless transit principles where cities and transportation agencies, as well as businesses and nonprofits, support a set of principles in favor of a seamlessly integrated public transportation system. And that's something that's been supported by a number of other cities in this county already, as well as around the region. And the benefit, and one city can't achieve this goal all by itself. No one entity can, but a benefit of signing on to the seamless transit principles, signing on is getting information about opportunities. There's several different regional initiatives that are happening that are advancing the potential for a seamless transit system that the city could be, get information about and then decide whether to support those things that would greatly benefit the city. So under some heading that staff can help me figure out what I was, I think I talked about this in the context of transportation master plan implementation, so we'll keep it here. We had recommended to bring forward a resolution to see if this body thought it was a good idea to support this resolution for the seamless transit principles and recommend it to the city council, as Redwood City has and San Mateo has and Fremont has and so on. So if it is the will of this body, this is not agendized, you can bring it back and have a discussion and decide whether we want to make that recommendation to the city council. And the last thing I will say about this is that one of my hats is in a nonprofit that is advancing the seamless transit principles. So I'm going to have to ask the city attorney, with what hat I should be involved in this discussion and whether I need to recuse myself from the vote. But at any rate, regardless of what role I am playing, the question is if it's the sense of this body that we should come back and agendize it, be happy to do it. Let's see, I think I can say without violating the Brown Act, because we have Councilmember Taylor, who is our liaison, she has actually supported this and wanted to know if she should bring it to the council independently. And I said, hey, let's do this in an orderly fashion and see if we want to recommend this as a commission first. So shall we agendize this item, fellow commissioners, and the subcommittee already wants to? Any objections?
Should I make a motion that we agendize this, or is that what we need? What's needed here, Zena?
We don't need a motion. We just need a sense of the commission, and then it can come through the chair and the vice chair. We can get it agendized. And this is also already okay with staff.
Right, yeah, so, sorry, Commissioner Cole, just, so staff is just looking for general support from the commission if there's, more than chair that is interested in at least learning more about this, because it sounds like it is kind of a regional effort that is, being taken by a regional entity that, the city may benefit from this. But I think there's still a lot of information for any commissioners to even, vote or support this seamless Bay Area principle that is being mentioned here. So I think at this moment in time, just looking for any interest, and then we can set up a time to agendize it and learn more about it from Chair Levin. So sorry to cut you off
Good
there,
idea.
Commissioner Cole.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. Sounds like a good thing to have come back before us as a group to learn about in
I
more
think
detail.
that's a good idea. I think partly because as a new person, I'm struggling to understand what it means to agendize something. Like, is that a big commitment on behalf of the commission? I don't feel like I know. It sounds like a good idea. I think staff has the right instincts to recommend it, but I guess I agree with you that maybe we can talk about this further.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair question and a great question. So when it comes to agendizing items, we obviously want to be considerate of your time as well. Our meeting does start at 7 p.m. So I try not to have too many items on there. So like I say, that usually going back to a conversation with Commissioner Altman a little bit earlier on, we try to put agenda items that need to come to the commission on a timely manner, those first. And if we have availabilities, then we would insert, some other items that subcommittees would like to bring on. So in this case, the commission overall is interested in learning about this. Then at the agenda setting meeting, by that time, I should know how many items the city staff needs to bring to the commission. And at that point, we'll look at it and say, hey, are there availability for next month to insert more items? And if not, then we'll find the next meeting, the next appropriate time. But ultimately, we try not to burden the commissioners with, 3-hour, 4-hour long meetings. I know the city councils can do it, but not. We try not to do that to the commissioners.
Okay.
I think the consensus is that we should move forward with.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it sounds like there is an interest in learning more about this. So we'll talk with the chair and the co-chair to find a time to put this on the agenda. Again, sounds like we have quite a few items already, so we'll need to make sure that we be strategic about this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, and is there anybody, and you don't need to decide now, but feel free to raise a hand if you think that you might be interested in the Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee. Okay, you don't need to decide now. The Zero Emission Subcommittee is something that has had more people on in the past, and the one person who is on it is not here. So I would propose that we put off describing this until Commissioner Cromie is here to describe what he has in mind with the current incarnation of the Zero Emission Subcommittee. So I would like to share a wacky orientation idea, which maybe we need to postpone because it's getting too late, but would it be possible actually to gather as a group in a larger than Brown Act set of people to talk more generally about how the commission works and some of the norms and culture and working with the community and working with city council, and then for any more detailed discussion to break up into groups of people who are interested in subcommittees to talk in sub-Brown Act sets of people about that, so we didn't violate the Brown Act in talking about anything in specific. Does that sound like a viable idea or a not? First staff, is this legal? And then people, does that sound like useful, informative, and fun, or too logistically complicated or too much trouble.
So just so that I'm clear on what is being asked here. So are we talking about some sort of an offline meeting amongst commissioners just to talk about essentially commission logistics, but not a single project, right? We're not talking about projects, but more just commission logistics at an offline.
Right.
And but you're asking if we can have more than 5 commissioners in this case, because
right, at something like a park bench or a cafe with outdoor seating, where as a more than Brown Act group, we would only talk about things like logistics and like process and working with the community and council. And then if we wanted to talk about anything specific, we would have to break up into subcommittee groups.
I'll certainly maybe defer to the city clerk, and more than happy to follow up. But my first inclination would be that's probably not ideal. While I recognize that this body might not be talking about any project specific or any project specific discussions, etc. I'm still a little bit reserved about having more than a quorum at an offline setting. And while I understand, the idea is just to familiarize new commissioners with with the commissions and how it's run. I am somewhat reserved about saying yes to it, just because anytime we're dealing with a quorum, even on a non-project specific conversations, it just it could potentially lead to something a little bit that's not ideal. So I don't want to outright say no yet. Let me touch base with the city clerk, but I am gonna err on the side of caution and say that's probably not the best idea. Certainly if we want to have it open discussion at a commission meeting, that is certainly okay. But let me get back to you, Chair. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Thank you for checking. We are at the bottom of the agenda. I would like to take chair's discretion and revisit the minutes, changing the mention of Manzanita to Transportation Management Associations, the more general term.
So in this case, I just need perhaps a consent from Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Sivrian, because they were also at the attending. If you're comfortable with this recommended change, I can go ahead and update it.
I'm in favor.
Okay, sounds good. Great, thank you.
All right, fantastic. With that, this meeting is adjourned until the next meeting, and it's really great to meet everybody here. Sorry that we ran so late. We don't usually run so late, and we'll reconvene in a month.
Great, thank you, Chair. And just a last minute plug to any of the new commissioners. This is a fairly long meeting for your first time around, so a lot of information to digest. If there's anything that you felt you needed more clarification on, feel free to send me an email or give me a call, and I'd be more than happy to. If I can answer it by email, I'll do so. If not, we can always set up a time to discuss further too. So certainly welcome any comments and feedbacks you might have. Don't be shy.
Okay, so
everyone.
bye. Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thanks.
Bye.